What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast. It's a beautiful Tuesday, nice and crispy outside, as in warm, hot, sunny. And I was thinking about doing some stuff today. I thought about doing the good, bad, and ugly from the preseason. And then I realized it's basically everything we've talked about. Themes from J.J. McCarthy's injury to the Steelers quarterback to the rookie quarterbacks being good. The only thing we didn't hit on was the Mahomes backward pass. Mahomes calling out Kelsey for running the wrong route. Kelsey saying I couldn't understand his weird voice. And then Andy making fun of it all, just kind of enjoying it, which was a pretty fun moment. Probably the most fun moment in the preseason. But I think what I'm going to do today is just do a big mailbag. I have a lot of mailbag questions. Easiest way to get in is just fire into my direct messages at John Middlekauff. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. And just empty the clip a little bit. And we're just a couple weeks away from the season starting. So let's just bang out some mailbag questions. That will be the plan today. Other than that, we got some interviews coming up next week. Got a couple in flux as well. That might be pretty fun leading up to the start of the regular season. So exciting times. We'll do a big betting preview next week with Stuckey, my guy from the Action Network. Have some futures I'm pretty fired up on. I've waffled back and forth. A lot of you guys have been on me about the Chargers. Fresno State football to win the Mountain West, about 5-1. Pretty decent odds. My guy Tim Skipper. But me and Stuckey will be all over that. We'll have a college football preview as well next week. So buckle up. A lot of content flying down the pike here. But before we dive into any football, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast. Do you want to go to one of these games? Do you want to go to a college football game this fall? Do you want to go to an NFL game? Do you want to just go enjoy yourself? Maybe get outside, have a few pops, have a few beers, sing some songs, go to a concert. I've been to 3 or 4 concerts over the last year. It just puts you in a good mood. You just start dancing, singing, no one judging you, get a little drunk, and just have a good time. And I've done it because my friends at Gametime, you search the venue, you search the artist, you search the game you want to go to. And I got a couple DMs of people that bought tickets with the app, and they said it couldn't be any easier. In these inflationary times, save a little money. How do you beat it? Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off the first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Okay, let's dive in to your questions. We'll start with Clay. Who would you rather have as a bridge backup quarterback? Sam Darnold, 66 games, 63 touchdowns, 56 picks. Gardner Minshew, pride of the Washington State Cougs, 49 games, 59 touchdowns, 24 interceptions. Well, it can't really be argued Gardner Minshew's had a better career so far than Sam Darnold. Not debatable. And Gardner, I looked before I came into the office, got more money this offseason than Darnold. Darnold got 1 year, $10 million. He got a multi-year deal, I think 15 guaranteed. So he got $5 million more and he got a $6 million signing bonus. So based on last season, you can't really argue. And early on in his Jacksonville career, Gardner was good. And Gardner, I think, has proven to be the ideal backup. And I think there's a big difference here. With a backup, I like to have concrete data. I don't like to have unknowns. Even last year with the Niners, there was a lot of unknown with Sam Darnold, right? Is he any good? If I had to go with a bridge quarterback, when you go bridge quarterback, you're acknowledging we're not going to be any good. Because how often is how about that team with that bridge quarterback win 11, 12 games? Doesn't usually happen, right? So to me, as a backup quarterback, based on the information we have right now, Minshew's be your pick. As a bridge quarterback, I would take the chance with Sam Darnold because, There's unknown. Maybe he just turns out to not be as good as Minshew. But what if he does? What if he turns out to be better? Because physically, he's on a different level. Bigger, stronger, bigger arm. Gardner's mobile. I think he's more mobile. But we don't know. And Kyle Shanahan believed in him. And now, obviously, Kevin O'Connell believes in him. So as a bridge quarterback, because I'm already acknowledging, like, I'm not a Super Bowl contender, I'll take the unknown with the upside. As a backup quarterback, I think you'd have to go with Gardner Minshew. Hope that answers the question. Message for the bag. Longtime listener from the UK. I'm a Panther fan and been trying to support the organization over the past 5 years. I'm watching Caleb on Hard Knocks, and it's clear to me he's everything Bryce Young isn't, which makes me sad as I hoped Bryce would be our savior last season. How does the franchise turn itself around with an owner like Tepper calling the shots? That one stings. That one really stings. Sometimes you just pick the wrong player, right? That's part of a draft. The Dolphins, if they could have a do-over, they would take Herbert over Tua, right? Last year, you traded up, and it looks like C.J. Stroud's going to be a star. Like, I think the Texans are going to be really good this year. Like 12, 13 wins, good. Be a potential legit Super Bowl contender. That hurts. Because when you traded up, it sure felt like it was unknown. You were picking between two players, and you chose the wrong one. Now, can Bryce be serviceable? We're going to find out. I think the only way, and I was hitting golf balls the other day, one weekday night, and a couple dudes that work at the course were just bullshitting big football fans, and one guy's like, I'm a Panther fan. Any hope? I'm like, yeah, I think your hope is your coach is a dynamic offensive play caller who's the head coach that people like, and your defense is good. I think that's the hope. And then just see if Bryce has anything. But the best part about this modern day football is think how many quarterbacks are coming in the league all the time. I mean, 6 guys just went in the top 12. So let's say worst case scenario, Bryce busts. You already paid the price. So the trade's over and done with. Well, you still got one more pick you own. But my point is that's sunk cost. It is what it is. The only thing you can worry about now is, can we just make this guy a top 20 quarterback? And then maybe can he be a top 14 quarterback? And if that's not the case, in 3 years, you'll draft another guy high. And you just won't pay him, right? Won't pick up his 5th-year option. Just move on. We just saw it happen. Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, Trey Lance, and who am I missing? Justin Fields. All on different teams. Before their 4th year. Trey Lance was before his 3rd year, was on a different team. Happens that fast. Which is the nice thing about this rookie contract scale, is it's not Sam Bradford, Matt Stafford, where you'd be in major trouble. It's you can pivot. So I think this year, the only thing to hope for, good defense and positive strides from Bryce. I would never write off a player, even when you're down on a player, which I'm down on him as well, after one season. Like, I don't care what you do in life. At 22, 23 years old, like, anything can be overwhelming. You adapt, you get more stable management, you get people that point you in the right direction. Hell, Tua just told us. My first 2 years, all I heard was, you suck. You suck. You suck. Like, I don't care who you are. Then you start questioning, do I suck? If I was told every day by my parents, by a coach, by a teacher that I saw nonstop, you're not any good, you would start to believe it. So I think the key is like positive reinforcement. And part of that, then you got to do it in the game. But I think Canales, from everything I've seen, seems to be a positive guy. Now, Frank was too. Like, it's not like he's a negative guy. He just clearly wasn't a good match. I'm a Raider fan who isn't delusional and fully expect us to win 6-7 games this year. Opposing head coaches, because of the division, the opposing head coaches, and now Nick's looks like he's got a strong future. I see us returning to the mid-2000s form before becoming a contender in our division, let alone the conference. As an NFL fan, what direction would you like to see the Raiders go? AP wasn't my first choice, but given the locker room, I understand the reasoning. Personally, I'd like to see them give him 4 years to at least clean off the stench of instability, barring a Hackett scenario. Since we are clearly the outlier in our division, the AFC West feels like a waiting game, much like the AFC East with Tom Brady. The hard part about winning 6 or 7 games is you draft like 13th. So to me, if you aren't going to be remotely close to 500, because if you're 8-9, that means you're in the wild card mix in the middle of December, and that's worth it. But if you win 6, it means you're out of it, but you're also not in the top 5 to draft a guy. So I think in a perfect world, if you're not going to be any good, is just to suck. I think the hard part about you guys is like Max wants to win. Christian Wilkins wants to win. Colton Miller, Devontae Adams. So you have this core of players that every team in the league would want. But when you have this quarterback situation and your head coach is like, I keep hearing, well, you keep counting out Gardner Minshew. Look at what he just did last year with the Colts. The Colts head coach is pretty clear. He's one of the better offensive coordinators in the league. Like Luke Getsy, I'm sorry, I can't say that. So I think in a perfect world, you just suck. You end up with a high pick and you draft a quarterback. Because that's the only way to get out of this thing. It's the only way to draft a guy who's going to become your starting quarterback for the next 10 years. It's the only way to change. Like, let's face it, you were a credible franchise with Derek. You had ups and downs, partly like you moved, you fired coaches, but you were just a credible franchise. It's hard to be a credible franchise when you're just moving quarterbacks nonstop. I saw Ed Werder posted on Twitter that Jaden Daniels named starting quarterback. It is the 8th starting quarterback for week 1 for Washington in the last 8 years. So you're like, why does Washington always suck? They have a new quarterback every single year. It's impossible to operate like that. You need stability at coach and you need stability at quarterback. And at least if your coach, you got questions out, as long as you got the quarterback, you can kind of change through. But until you find the quarterback, you're just kind of moving in no man's land. And people were very, very critical of Derek over the years, Raider fans, which I understand. He had some weird moments, but he brought stability and gave you a shot. In a couple years, you made the playoffs because of him. I've been watching for a couple years now. Love the content. Sending from my wife's Instagram. I think due to Mahomes and the Chiefs' fatigue, people want to say that Allen is more talented than Mahomes just because he's more physical as a runner. But that doesn't take into account Mahomes is more accurate with a stronger arm. I would say Josh Allen is the strongest arm in the league. So I would say Josh Allen's strongest arm in the league. Mahomes is right up there, but part of the reason people say that is he's bigger, he's faster, and he has a stronger arm. We're just talking talent. Talent is different from the player. Peyton Manning wasn't more talented than Michael Vick, right? Michael Vick was way faster and a way stronger arm. Peyton Manning was a much better player. So just because we've seen a lot of talented people fail in every walk of life. Talented people fail every day, and they will for the history of time. Just because you have talent at whatever doesn't mean shit. I mean, it helps if you can harness it, but that's what people are saying. There's a media narrative that Allen outplayed Mahomes in the thrilling 13-second game. But Mahomes made all the tight window throws against the number 1 defense, and Allen, with less stats, was throwing against an injured below-average defense with guys running wide open. They were, because what's his name had 4 touchdowns in that game. Thoughts on why Mahomes' performance in a win gets so much underrated by the media? I really can't do this. I mean, I appreciate the question, but I mean, I think Mahomes has been anointed like he's Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, or Tom Brady. I don't see how Patrick Mahomes, he's universally considered, beside the players in the NFL somehow voted Tyreek Hill, the best player in the league, one of the best players of all time, and on an unprecedented run. And after last year, everyone's like, tip our cap. How'd he do that? No one saw that coming. So I don't think there's any narrative out there from anyone credible saying anything about Patrick Mahomes that isn't, positively supportive. Been hungry for some college football? Well, we finally get a taste this weekend. Don't miss any of the action. Jump in at DraftKings Sportsbook. It's a small but mighty slate of games for Week 0, including a big matchup in Ireland. This is going to be DraftKings' biggest college football season to date. Enjoy the ride, now all the way through the expanded playoffs. Plus, all newbies getting into the college spirit, here's something extra special. New DraftKings customers bet just $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings all college football season long. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. Crown is yours. I was listening to you and Colin compare Reid and Belichick, and there is something important that I never hear brought up in this debate. I would suggest that the biggest difference between Bill and Andy is not the fact that the current Super Bowl count is 6-3 Bill. That's an output of the actual main difference. The biggest difference is that Bill Belichick got his Mount Rushmore quarterback, Brady, when he was 50 years old, while Andy Reid only got his Mount Rushmore quarterback, Mahomes, when he was 60 years old. I don't think it's fair to say Andy Reid. I don't think it's fair to Andy Reid to ignore the fact that he was 10 years later in life when he finally got the quarterback comparable to Tom Brady and started reeling off championships at a similar rate to Bill. Thoughts? I don't even know what we're debating, right? Because it's hard to overcome quantity. And when you got 6, even if you're comparing it to 3, Andy be the first to tell you, like, he'd do anything to have 6 when it's all said and done. And if he only gets 4, like, you always have the trump card. You can argue LeBron's career was better in terms of the longevity. Michael goes, I got 6 fucking rings, homie. And that ain't never changing. It's just not. So the fact that he got the quarterback at 60, he's not going away, right? I think Andy's coaching for the foreseeable future. So can he win 5 or 6? Because if he does, then it's not debatable. You could argue if Andy gets 5, look how successful he was with Donovan McNabb, not very accurate. Michael Vick, some serious flaws, was coming out of prison. He was going to the playoffs every year with Alex Smith. Bill Belichick is a defensive genius. Andy Reid is an offensive genius. They are both champions. You give them a great quarterback, they are kicking your ass. You could argue they're just equals. On the Mount Rushmore of coaches, maybe the argument now is like Andy Reid is on it now. And especially if he just wins another one, keeps rattling off. I mean, is it Lombardi, Walsh? I mean, there are other guys people will push back on me. I'd go Lombardi, Walsh, Belichick, Andy Reid. I think that's the better way to put it. But very fair. If Andy got Mahomes at 50 years old, he'd probably win 6. Here's one major difference, and I do believe this to my core. Andy's much easier to deal with. And Andy or Bill are friends, but Andy found a guy that he allows to run the personnel department. Bill, at the end of the day, was always in charge. So Caserio, Scott Pioli, like, the buck stopped at Bill. Andy lets Veach draft. Andy's coaches like being there. Most people, if you talk to, that worked in New England, wasn't a very fun place. Not that Kansas City or Philly is easy. It's hard. I've been there. Long days. It's intense. But it's not like you want to jump off the bridge every day. And listen, your personality is your personality. One guy is a Northeastern curmudgeon. The other guy's a sandal-wearing, Hawaii shirt, button-up guy from LA. And their personalities show. And some people in the Northeast yearn for that. Me, like, I kind of like being around the West Coast vibe, which he runs. I guess I don't even know if he'd consider it the West Coast offense anymore, but that was his bread and butter. I'll choose the West Coast guy if they're all going to be equal. Northeast guys like the being angry all the time. I don't like being angry all the time. I'm happy. Life's great. Want to smile. Want to enjoy life. Bill's not a big enjoy life guy, beside when he leaves the building and then goes with his young girlfriend, which he should. Why wouldn't you date a 30-year-old if you can? If you're 72, would you rather date a 30-year-old or 72-year-old? I think we'd all choose what Bill's doing. So props to Bill for enjoying life. But he's kind of an angry curmudgeon who's great at his job. But he's angry a lot, really angry and just edgy and just, ugh. I also think, like, Bill, have a cup of coffee. Have a cup of coffee. Bill doesn't drink coffee. I guess Andy doesn't either because he doesn't like caffeine, or he can't drink caffeine because of Mormon, but he's not angry all the time. Longtime listener, respect your knowledge. Rams' future to make the Super Bowl. If healthy, that may be a stretch. Stafford can huck it with the best of them. Supposedly first to second year defensive linemen are supposed to be studs. Thoughts? The one thing that gives me pause, they're going to be good. They just are. I think he's established himself, their team building, their roster, their youth, their team speed, the defensive linemen, like you said, they're good. Stafford makes me nervous. Not the player, but he already was injured in training camp. You talk about a guy, he's a weathered individual. Like when you meet those people, especially when you're a kid, your parents had friends, when they're in their 40s or 50s, and you're like, this guy's just a drinker or a cigarette smoker, and he looks like he's 70 years old and he's 46. Like, this dude's lived hard. I mean, when you see the pictures of people from the 90s, the 80s, the 70s of their ages, you're like, wait, that guy was 38 years old. I saw this thing on Instagram. They did Tony Soprano, James Gandolfini, how old he was during The Sopranos. Maybe I would have realized this if I went to his wiki page. I just assumed when they were shooting The Sopranos, Tony, I don't know, was 50 years old. The Gandolfini was 50 years old. First couple of years, he was like 38, 39 years old. He's my age. Looked like he was 56. Might have been the makeup or whatever. Obviously, got a little bigger. But I relate this to Stafford. Stafford is just a weathered 36-year-old because the pounding he took in Detroit, playing on those shitty teams, been injured a lot. Tom Brady, you see him right now, you're like, I don't know what this guy's eating. What we do, at least what he claims in the book, whatever he's putting into his body, looks fantastic. I know he's got a little work done, but just his body's in great shape. Remember Roethlisberger? Like his last couple years, you're like, this dude's been around the block, just struggling to move a little bit. Cam, the beating he took, it was just like, you watch him those last couple of years, like, this guy's taking a lot of beating. And that makes me nervous with guys like Stafford, is just the tread on the tires. Like, not all tread on the tires is the same. That's what's kind of weird about Russell. It's like, I didn't view Russell as a guy just getting mollywopped all the time because he'd always scramble out of the pocket. Stafford, Rivers was like this. He would just sit in the pocket last second, partly because he had to, because he didn't have the greatest arm, throw it and just get crushed. I mean, crushed. Rivers was one of those guys, like 37 years old. He felt like he was like 48. So if Stafford plays 17 games, they'll be lock playoff team and Super Bowl contender. If weird stuff happens with him, which is understandable given the beating he's taken in his life on the football field, I hate their backups. I think Stetson Bennett is terrible. I mean, I think I don't think he's an NFL player. And Jimmy Garoppolo, the guy we've seen the last couple of years, is also not very good. Question from Germany. Do you think the NFL will try to expand with a European franchise in the next decade? I would say no. Just because logistically, I do think it would be tough. Part of Monday and Tuesday during the season, when you have injuries, you work guys out, you sign guys. Even from Philadelphia, sometimes you sign a dude from California or Arizona. If he's there working out, that's a 4 or 5 hour flight. Well, if the guy's on the West Coast trying to get him to London, I think logistically it could be hard. I think the travel of just playing a full-time schedule over there, I would never say never, but if you had to check a box, yes or no, as of today, I would say no. I think they kind of like what they're doing is they get to play, I don't know the exact number of games this year, but it feels like, I mean, just off the top of my head, I guess 6. I guess Germany had a game, Brazil's got a game, but I think they just like kind of the rotation of throwing games over there and not having to have a franchise. Now, yeah, so I would say no. This is from Cliff the Mailman. I listen to you delivering mail out here in Palmdale, California, home of Paul George and Afro Man. I'm a Charger fan. How far do you think realistically they will get this season, considering that Justin is banged up a bit and they didn't acquire any proven players that are running backs? Palmdale by Afro Man's one of my favorite songs of all time. If that song comes on, which it wouldn't just come on anywhere, you have to like actively seek it. It's just a great jam. Highly recommend listening to that soon. Palmdale, Afro Man. I would say this is going to be a year for Harbaugh. If he's able to have them 9-10 wins with the offensive personnel, it's just like his shit works. And I go back and forth. Am I going to have the stones to pick him to make the playoffs? I might not. But I'm not totally against it. I just believe in the guy. And I've seen him win so many games with no wide receivers. I mean, guys that just aren't that good. He did it in Michigan. He did it at Stanford. He did it with the 49ers. Now, he's always had a good tight end, and he's had good running backs. The thing with the NFL is you can function without Walter Payton or Emmitt Smith. Right? Who are their 2 running backs? J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Now, health is a concern with those 2 guys. But if you tell me those 2 guys combined for 1,500 yards, I think it's believable. Because that's what they do. And then at the end of the day, you got a really good quarterback. So you can make guys on offense look better. And defensively, I think the main question is health, because they got impact players if they're on the field. But how many games do Khalil Mack, Derwin James, and Joey Bosa play? If you tell me they play 90%, I'd say, yeah, I think their defense could be pretty solid. Because here's the other thing. No matter who his defensive coordinator is, from Fangio at Stanford and 49ers to the guys he went through in Michigan, to Mike McDonald, who's now with Seattle, who's with him in Michigan, to mentor the guy that he's got now, they're good. And obviously, they've had good players over the years. You can't be good on defense without good players. It's impossible. I don't give a shit how good your scheme is. To be a good defense, you need good players. The best defenses in my life, college and pro, all have dudes. So you need your star players to be there. But he practices a certain way. So that toughens up your team. Like there's some guys that just come out of the womb that are like, Navy SEAL tough. Or just like Chuck Liddell. Toughness is something that you can develop. Definitely mental toughness. Think we've all got older. As you go through things in life, adversity, you lose people, you get fired, your business goes under, like you get a little mentally tougher. Well, in football, how do you get mentally tougher? Not everyone is just Tom Brady showing up to practice. You practice hard. You get pushed. Saban talked about it on Hard Knocks. Most people are not born leaders and winners. You have to teach them that. And that's what Harbaugh does. And he creates it. It's why guys come out tougher than before he showed up. So they're going to be tough. I'll promise you that. And I don't mean like physically. I just mean like on a weekly basis. There'll be some games where they probably get throttled. Right? If Herbert plays bad and they've got injuries. But they're going to knock some people off. And if he can get some momentum, I don't think it's inconceivable they make the playoffs. But very, very health concerning, because this will be the least deep roster he'll have moving forward by a mile. Was wondering if you recall your time as a scout or your time at Fresno, a player who you thought no doubt had the talent to play in the league, but because of some outside circumstances, they never got a chance to compete. In college, some guys get injured and it derails their career and they never really get to play. Cole Popovich who, when I got to Fresno State, had just had a bad injury, I think, in training camp. He ended up becoming a offensive line coach in the NFL, worked for Belichick for a while. He was an NFL player, but injury derailed his career. Uh, Once you get to the NFL, even if an injury derails your career, you get there, right? So my first year with the Eagles was Brandon Graham's rookie year. He had a bad knee injury. And sometimes like that derails guys' career, and he's gone on to have, I don't know, he's going to probably get his number retired one day with the Eagles. So yeah, I mean, I don't remember, most of our star players were, Shady McCoy, Deshaun Jackson, Jeremy Maclin, Michael Vick, just healthy guys. So I think it happens a lot in college football, NFL talent, and they have a bad injury and it ruins their career. Because even if you get to the NFL and we're going to be a really good player, if you get injured, like you made it to the league, which sucks because if you become a good player, you get paid a lot of money. But like there is something to be said. Like I was an NFL player. We've all, depending on how big your town is growing up, you meet a guy who played in pro sports. And whether he was like, oh, this guy was a 10-year vet, or like, oh, this guy only played a couple years, had a bad shattered a clavicle, was never the same. But it's like this guy was a pro baseball player, pro whatever. So I think it happens much more in college. eBay Motors is here for the ride. The first car I ever got, I was 16 years old, and my grandpa gave me a ride. And like any young lad who got a car that, let's face it, would not have been my first choice, I had to touch it up a little bit. And we tinted out the windows. We added a big subwoofer to the back. And you could hear me from miles away coming home. My parents sure loved me for that one. So did my neighbors. But I think the key to any young person getting a car is to personalize a little bit. Because you're probably not going to get your dream car. And as you get older, you kind of become a car person or you don't. But you definitely have preferences, right? Some of us like bigger cars. I know I do. I've only had big cars, SUVs. And there are certain non-negotiables. I like 3 rows of seats. Now, ideally, I don't have kids right now, so I take out that 3rd row seat, and I like a big, I like a lot of trunk room. Some people, don't like SUVs, like smaller cars. I've never been that big since my high school car of tinting the windows. I don't care if you see me or not, but I know some people, like, the first thing they do is tint the windows. It's crazy. The older you get, I had to have the subwoofers. The subwoofer, I couldn't listen to music for 5 minutes with the subwoofer like I did when I was younger. But there is something very, very special about that first car. I don't care how many cars you get since, how much money you make to get sweeter cars. You never quite forget that first ride and some of the memorable moments that you had in it in your high school years. So with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. What are your thoughts on the NFL using the preseason for international games? The big soccer teams in Europe usually spend 2 weeks during the season overseas visiting the US, Japan, Australia. This gives the league the chance to expand globally, but also not impact the regular season. Also, from watching preseason, the attendances are low, and I've watched the past teams such as Liverpool and Manchester fill out the Rose Bowl, so there's an opportunity to play in front of large crowds. When I was with the Eagles, Manchester United came, maybe a team, I don't know if it was Liverpool, but Man U definitely came. So yeah, I remember that for sure. I'm not a huge soccer guy, but not a I think the hard part is the preseason for football. I can't speak to how soccer works, but logistically, taking my team over there, losing practice time, the preseason games are kind of irrelevant. They're filler TV spots, and they're just spots, obviously, get the backups, but they're not irrelevant in the sense that it's just about evaluating. And that evaluation time, I was thinking the other night when the Saints played the Niners, we got to figure out this preseason game. They played them on Sunday night across the country. So by the time the Saints get home, right, the game ends at 8:30. By the time everyone's showered, eaten, gets to the bus, gets to the airport, you're not even leaving until 11 or midnight. Obviously, you lose hours. Like, that's bullshit. You should play teams in your region. Even if I get maybe you should just play the team in your opponent's, or like, if you're an NFC West team, you should play the AFC West and just mix and match. The travel should not be different time zones. The Titans and Niners shouldn't be playing. What are we doing? So I think the preseason, the travel should be at a minimum. I also think it'd be a little risky. It feels like I didn't do a study on this, but I texted them on this the other night. It feels like every preseason game is 6-3 at halftime and finishes 13-10 or 16-13. They're pretty terrible. Now, you could argue it feels like a lot of the international games are not very good either, but I don't think coaches or GMs or owners would want any part of that. They have to fly over there with all your young guys. You need a bigger plane too, I think, because your traveling party is so much bigger. You think Deshaun Watson is going to have a job if he plays like he does this year? I think he meant did. I'm not a Browns fan, but Jameis Winston, when he played for the Bucs, was must-watch television and was going to throw 50-yard bombs or a pick six. I think they're just going to go down with the ship this year with Deshaun. If it's good, great. If it's not, I think he's going to get a pretty long leash. They're just too financially invested. And this is not a situation where Sean Payton had all the juice. Like, ultimately, if I was the owner and he's healthy, I got to see him play 17 games. I do. And then we'll evaluate at the end of the season if it's a disaster. But I can't imagine the Flying J, Pilot J, whatever the hell they're called, not forcing him to play, even if it's ugly. I know when the Bears fired Matt Nagy, everyone believed it was warranted. But with seeing how poorly Trubisky and Fields played after he left, it's almost more impressive he was able to get them to the playoffs twice. Given how highly Mahomes speaks of him, do you think he'll get another chance? Usually offensive coaches who have the support of star quarterbacks get another chance. Matt Nagy, 1,000,000% will be a head coach again. It's the thing with Flores, right? You can't get along with quarterbacks, and the quarterback who you kept telling who he sucked, he was a scrub, turned out to be solid. Like, it doesn't reflect very well on you. If Tua had been terrible, I think I'd support him. I'd be like, he was right. I wouldn't want to deal with that either. This is the big leagues. Don't need to hold your hand. But Flores looks worse because Tua is good. Where on the flip side, you could argue no one's winning with Mitch Trubisky. You could argue he's one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL on a 2-deep. If you had to rank 1 through 64, I know some teams keep 3, but let's just say 1 through 64. I'd have to look through it, but there's a decent chance Mitch is somewhere between 62 and 64. Fields is obviously better than Trubisky, but he's not a top 30 quarterback. So who would win with him? Aged pretty well. I'm not just saying that because he's my friend. It definitely has. Question for the mailbag. Long-time Bills fan. I was there when they blew that lead to the Texans and Watson in 2019. It's kind of crazy how far Deshaun has fallen since moments like that. That was a game I vividly remember sitting on my couch watching at my old condo in the Bay, and thinking it was like 2 NBA players, like Steph and Clay. It was DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson. You ain't beating us. And they couldn't stop those two guys. It was like, these two are just elite players. And now Deshaun's viewed as one of the bigger question marks in the league. How would you rank Watson among the rest of the quarterbacks in the league if he could return to that form? I mean, if he returns to that form, he's a Pro Bowl high-end player. If he returns to that form, the Browns are a Super Bowl contender. I mean, end of story. But that's a long time ago. I mean, we are 4 months away from 2025. And you're talking about 2019. So things change fast. I was telling someone the other day, you know, the craziest part, in my opinion, of training camp in August in the NFL is how fast a guy, and anyone who's a fan of a specific team knows this, you draft a guy in like the second or third round, and his career's just weird, right? Doesn't really play much as a rookie. People are excited about him as a second-year player. Maybe gets injured, just not that good. And by the third year in preseason, you're like, this guy's got no chance to make the team. This other fifth rounder that they just drafted is better. This guy they signed's better. The attrition and the ability to kind of work through and churn out old, highly drafted players moves at rapid speed in football. Because every year you got 7 rounds and undrafted free agents. It's like, yeah, we just drafted this guard 2 years ago in the third round. We're going to cut him now. Because this guy we just drafted in the 5th round is better. This free agent signing we signed for $4 million is better. We'll just move on. And no one cares. It's like, yeah, it's the right thing to do. And maybe that guy picks up with another team, but the amount of people every single year, unless you're just a stalwart star coming for your job in the NFL, is unlike the other sports. Because it's difficult in the minor leagues. In football, you come right to the big club if I'm a 6th-round pick. And if I'm a 6th-round wide receiver or linebacker, like I'm getting reps pretty quickly with the 2s or the 3s, and I got a chance to just keep moving up. Injury, boom, I'm in. The 49ers right now, they draft this dude from Kansas, Pooney, right guard. Brian Baldinger put something out on social media the other day. Well, their 2 guards are injured. So what happened? He gets to start. Then what happens? He's just good. Then what happens? He's now the starter. And those guys that were starting in the Super Bowl are now backups. One of them could get cut. That's how fast it happens. One off season. Boom. There's nothing like it because of the new talent that comes in that can play. Like the NBA is 2 rounds, new talent comes in, but most of them have no shot of making the team. In football, you got undrafted free agents who become starters. It's crazy. Mailbag question. There's a lot of commentary about Jerry Jones waiting too long to pay CeeDee, and he should just get it over with now. Could Jerry see CeeDee's potential holdout into the season as a negotiating tactic for Dak and McCarthy's contract by seeing what they can do without their best offensive weapon? It's a lot easier to not pay Dak $60 million when he's in the middle of the pack statistically for the quarterbacks. And if Jerry doesn't have to pay Dak at the top of the market, it makes it easier to pay Micah and CeeDee Lamb. Any insight into this strategy? My pushback on that theory is pretty simple. Jerry's trying to win, in theory. What's the point of having CeeDee miss games and lose to the Browns because he's at home when you're going to pay him, when it's inevitable? If it was one of those like, yeah, might trade you, might get rid of you, that's not the case here. So if you know the guy's going to be there, you want to get this done, you want to get this done now. So every day that goes by, I don't think it has any bearing on this situation. Dak's number is kind of his number because if he hits free agency, other teams are going to be willing to pay him. And because of the way his contract was set up, they can't franchise tag him. So he's going to know what other teams are willing to pay him, and the Cowboys are going to have to negotiate against that. This situation, I think, has just kind of gotten out of control because of his unwillingness to do it early, and now they're in this weird position. Though, I do understand, like, you got to keep CeeDee Lamb. You drafted him high. He's sweet. You want him on your team. He's a winning player. You got to keep Micah Parsons. You drafted him high. He's sweet. He's a winning player. The Dak thing stuff. But I keep getting back to he's the hardest player to replace. It's easy to like get off Sam Darnold or Gardner Minshew. It's easy to get off Mac Jones or Kenny Pickett when they're not any good. It's hard. It's like, well, we're winning 11, 12 games and Dak's throwing 30 touchdowns and like at spots during the season in the MVP conversation. Yeah, he blows it in January, but half the league would die to be in January. We're there. Cowboys in a weird spot. You could tell me all three scenarios. CeeDee holds out into the season. Cowboys start slow. It gets really weird. They sign CeeDee over the next week or two. He comes back. They beat the Browns week 1. Everyone's really happy. There's nothing I wouldn't believe about the Cowboys. Okay, last question here. I got a question for you that I don't think I've seen anyone bring up. Everyone talks about how much Shane Steichen leaving the Eagles affected Jalen Hurts. And even as the biggest Hurts fan out there, it's hard to argue against it. My question is, do you think the Texans should be worried about Slowick leaving the Texans for a head coaching job if CJ takes a further step? While D'Amico seems to be an elite coach, he's a defensive guy and has nothing to do with the offense. Part of having success when you have a defensive coach and a quarterback succeed is losing offensive coordinators. Nothing you can do about that. Here's what I think is going to happen. If they win 12 games in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs, Bobby Slowick's going to be a head coach. That's a fact. He will be. It's impossible for him not to be. Shanahan guys have proved they just become head coaches. Then I think what D'Amico would do is go to the 49ers and hire there's Clay Kubiak and Clint Kubiak. I get them mixed up. One of them's the coordinator right now for the Saints. The other one is kind of Kyle's right-hand guy, who Kyle let call plays during the preseason. I think you just hire that guy. And Kyle can't stop it because Kyle's not going to let him call plays, right? Because Kyle's the play caller. So that guy would go to the Texans. That would be my guess. Because I think they'd want to keep the offense the same. That would be the easiest way to transition. So if it wasn't that, you would go to McVay or O'Connell. You would just hire their guy. What do? They can't keep him. Why? All those guys call plays. So their number 2, they're going to lose him every time, as they should. I mean, that's only fair. You don't get to keep a guy if he's not calling plays. So I would be prepared to lose Bobby Slowick if this season goes well, and all signs point to this season going well.